Okay, so good morning from the UK. It's 20 to 8 in the morning as I start this. So the sun's just rising. And a lot has happened since I did my last live stream and the last video. A lot's happened in football. A lot of people have lost their jobs. We've seen a lot of sackings over November and December. And Carlo Ancelotti is now on the manager market, and a club like Arsenal could really use him. David Moyes has been strongly linked with the Everton job, and I think if Everton were to hire David Moyes, that would be a massive step back in the past. I think Everton needs to look forward. With the Carlo Ancelotti sacking, really surprised that Napoli decided to take the decision when they did, considering that he's qualified them for the last 60 in the Champions League. His record in the Champions League is second to none. He's one of the best managers in Champions League history. And he has a record of taking sides that, while they're not doing great in the league, like AC Milan, getting them to the final and winning. And that's an interesting one, but he's now available on the manager market, and Arsenal could use a manager like Carlo Ancelotti because he knows the English game. He speaks multiple languages. He's used to working with big egos in the dressing room. He can make players play better. And I think Arsenal have mismanaged a lot of things over the last decade or so since they moved from Highbury to the Emirates. And my views of Valentine Holmes signing with the Cowboys. He has obviously not played NRL rugby league for a while. He's obviously experimented with the NFL. The Cowboys, though, yeah, they could use that kind of winger who's got that ability to score 5 tries from nothing. He's proven in the Rugby World Cup a couple of years ago that he can score a record number of tries. He's pacey, he's quick, he can create something from nothing. I think the Cowboys are still recovering from the Jonathan Thurston era. They are lacking that bit of spark. I think they could use... It depends how they use him effectively. They're not the side that they were. They were very indifferent last season. They were hot and cold. They didn't quite look right. I think it's a big signing for them, but he hasn't played rugby league for a while. So it'll be interesting to see, how up to speed he is with the sport, some of the rule changes, the changes in the style of play. But at the same time, let's see how he adapts his game from where it was when he left the NRL to now. In the last 2 years, the game has changed, but he's still exceptionally pacey. He can create tries from nothing, and he's an exception. His try record is exceptional, but he also needs that service. He needs to be supplied with the ball and put in those positions where he can take on a defender one-on-one and go forward and take on that defender, make the defender think, create the space. He needs to have space as well to be effective. So it'd be interesting to see how tactically the Cowboys use him as well. Tristan Jarry is this year Bennington. Pittsburgh have had a lot of injuries, and Matt Murray is not playing as well as he could, and his numbers have been down. But the Pittsburgh Penguins have been hammered with injuries. Absolutely hammered. While they're still being competitive and they're still around the playoff hunt, it's too early in the season to see how much of an effect it's going to have. But I think some of their key players are starting to break down. Crosby and Malkin are starting to get more and more injuries, and I think they're going to have to start, I wouldn't say rebuilding, but starting to promote some of their prospect players into the lineup, get them some game time. Could he be this year's Bennington? We'll have to see. I mean, we're not at the Christmas break yet. That's coming up. We're not at the... some teams already having their bye week, which a lot of fans have complained about the bye weeks. I'm indifferent to the bye week. I think with an odd number of teams on any given night, if you've got a full fixture list, a team is going to have a night off. The bye week is a thing. It's part of the NHL now. But if you've got De Smith in there as well and Matt Murray, you've got 3 goalies. One of them is going to be trade bait. Whether they decide to trade Matt Murray or De Smith or Jari at the trade deadline will be interesting. It's going to be interesting going forward with 3 goalies who are of an equal level, I think. They're all young. They've got a lengthy period of time ahead of them. It's not as if they're in their 30s. They're all in their 20s. They're all young, but they've got to use them effectively, and they have to manage the game time. I think St. Louis got pretty decent luck with Bennington and the way the team were playing. It made it easier for him to make the saves and have a really good save percentage and a good win record. But if the injuries continue with Pittsburgh and their key players, be it defensemen or forwards, keep going down injured, that's going to put a lot of pressure on a young goaltender who was considered trade bait 6 months ago. What do I think of Jamaica and Greece qualifying? It's a positive step in the right direction for rugby league, but at the same time, they're not going to win a game. Let's be clear on this. They are not going to be at the same level of even Lebanon were a couple of years ago. But it is good that I think it's showing good positive signs for rugby league, but at the same time, there is a massive money issue within the sport. And we're not just seeing that. I'm going to have to turn the light on because the lighting here is so bad. Let's get some light. That's better. Now we can see what I'm doing. I think Greece and Jamaica qualifying is a positive step in the right direction, but rugby league is still lacking significantly behind rugby union in player depth and national depth of all the nations. I think rugby union has won that battle with getting more registered players, more professional players. And I think if rugby league is to catch up and grow, then they're going to have to expand the World Cup or change the World Cup format, or in some way, shape, or form increase the professional teams around the world. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they need a successful World Cup where crowds are good consistently rather than spotty crowds, which we've seen in the last couple. Well, what we've seen with the World Cup 2 years ago and the New Zealand England series last year, they couldn't fill stadiums. They chose the wrong stadiums, if anything. And when you go into places like Hull, where you've got a rugby league mad city with two good quality professional teams, and you can't fill the KC Stadium, that says there are worrying signs. So I'm going to wait and see how positive those two teams qualifying, those nations qualifying for the World Cup. But I think it will be interesting to see how the sport develops going forward and how many more nations start qualifying for the World Cup for the first time and how many more people start picking up the game at grassroots level. But there is a money issue, a massive money issue. But with Sonny Bill Williams going back into rugby league and Valentine Holmes going to the Cowboys, it's things like this, these superstar players that moving back into the sport, which could help with crowd numbers, could help with getting young kids playing the game, adults playing at amateur level and wanting to play it again. So there is hope there, but there are massive issues with finances. There are massive issues with attendance, and I think quality level as well. I think rugby union has definitely won that battle of the codes with crowds, participation, registered players, professionalism, and there are issues with rugby union as well. Let's not pretend that both codes of rugby are in a healthy state. There are some massive concerns on player welfare, crowd numbers, participation, costs, profits, TV deals. It's a very complex situation, but I think I'm going to sit and wait and see. I was really pleasantly surprised with Lebanon and Italy and Ireland. The US have qualified a couple of times now, so I've been pleasantly surprised in a good way with some of the minor nations improving. And yes, Jamaica could beat teams like Wales or the Cook Islands, but at the same time, again, we have to sit and wait and see see how the sport develops in these up and coming nations. But it does need money, and it does need sustainable growth, I think is the phrase we're looking for. Primo being called up to Montreal and playing a couple of games. I think Carey Price, I think the contract is now starting to look a massively bad contract. We've seen it with the Islanders in the past with their goaltending contracts. I think Primo has shown that he has no fear at this level, and he's only played a couple of games, but he has some decent numbers. But Montreal themselves are in this really bad period of poor form. When you're throwing in a young 20-year-old into the NHL and expecting him to, win you games, not every goaltender is a Patrick Roy or a Curtis Joseph, who can be as young. Oh, Jordan Bennington was actually older. He'd spent a long time being, developing, but Primo hasn't had that time to develop at the NHL level, and you do risk if he keeps being thrown into a situation where the team is on a losing trend, that it will harm his development. Lindgren has also played games as well, but the issue with Carey Price's contract is it's an unmovable contract. It's so bad. It's not the player's fault necessarily that he's been paid that money. He's obviously got a very good agent who can get him a good deal for him, but for the team with the salary cap, it's a problem. And he is becoming more and more injury prone. And while there'll be many fans and neutrals as well who say he's possibly the best goaltender in the league, he hasn't won a Stanley Cup. He hasn't got his team to a Stanley Cup final. He has fallen apart in the playoffs, and he has got regularly injured. Lindgren and Primo. Lindgren has had obviously some game time with Carey Price being injured over the last couple of years, but ironically, losing Antti Niemi, I'm going to say that out there, you've lost that experience in a dressing room when you need to call up Primo or Lindgren to the senior squad from the Laval Rockets. You have lost a Stanley Cup winner, ironically. And while Niemi's numbers are completely fallen off a cliff, if you had kept him around in the organisation, even if he retired and went into the goalie coaching side, you've lost that winning experience, and you've lost the experience of actually winning a Stanley Cup and saying, look, this is how you get a Stanley Cup ring. This is what you've got to do. But I think Montreal, the Price contract, it's a concerning one if he continues to be injury prone. I think, if Antti Niemi, I feel very sorry for how his career ended at the NHL level. But I think it's going to be interesting. And goaltending, they tend to take longer to develop than other players. They tend to take longer to get up to speed. So the fact that he's not even 22 or 21 and he's playing at the NHL is, I think, a good experience for him. But I think they have to manage his time correctly, and they have to look at the fact that the whole team itself is lacking a little bit of confidence and is struggling at the moment. But Montreal haven't looked close to winning a Stanley Cup since 1993, and that there are issues within the organisation that need to be addressed if they are to get to a Stanley Cup final. I think there are teams that are far better built to win or are playing with far better confidence. There seems to be a confidence issue. There could be a roster issue. Is Claude Julien the right guy to coach the team? And is, have the right trades been made? Has the lineup been built correctly? It's more than just a goaltending issue. It's a far wider issue within that organisation. And when you got like someone like Carey Price saying Antti Niemi was really positive for that dressing room and really positive for his play, that tells you something. When you have a Stanley Cup winner in that dressing room, and the other players are feeding off that, it tells you something. Will they make the playoffs? I think again it's too early to say with what St. Louis did last year, and how they had that second half of the season run. But I do think some teams have already shot themselves in the foot, and there's one team I'm going to talk about in a bit who have had a record-breaking losing streak. And again, when you're throwing in young players, it can harm their development and the mentality of a dressing room. And losing more than you're winning, can have an effect on especially a young group. And the NHL is getting younger, but at the same time, I think it's getting more exciting because the league is getting younger and more mistakes are being made. So it's more entertaining to watch as a neutral, but as a hardcore fan, you'll be frustrated with your team giving away, silly goals or silly penalties or making errors in front of the net. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But I think, the goaltending is an issue for Montreal. If Carey Price goes down injured again, who knows what could happen. And yes, he is becoming injury prone. And his numbers this season have been really, really bad for the standards of an NHL standard goaltender. They've not been great. But he's not the only goaltender who's having lower stats than they would do on a peak year or an average season. But his numbers have been worrying, but the defense in front of him and the team in front of him, a lot of their numbers have been a bit concerning. And we haven't even got to Detroit yet, and their record losing streak, and the fact that 5 coaches have been sacked since they last won a game. Just going to put that out there. 5 coaches have been sacked since the Detroit Red Wings last won a game, and they've only won 7 games all season. I got to do a video on the Detroit Red Wings and see if they actually are on pace for a record-breaking bad season since the salary cap era. I know that some teams like the Washington Capitals in like 70, 71 or something were absolutely atrocious. But I do think, looking at this Detroit Red Wings team, this could be a record-breaking bad season. Absolutely. I mean, because and considering that Detroit were the most consistent team for like 25 seasons of always making the playoffs, to see a team that's gone from being so consistent and winning Stanley Cups and being in the playoffs every season to this, it's been a very sharp, rapid decline. It hasn't taken long. And you see that in a lot of sports where a team has been so dominant or so consistent for so long, and then when that squad finally reaches its end game, or they finally have that first bad season, a second bad season quickly follows, and then it's gonna go on and on and on. The World Cup draw of Rugby League is working. New Zealand, Australia, Tonga, England, all the Pacific Islands. I think that could be interesting. I think that they're trying, obviously, to spread the big teams out a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see how they format it. It's going to be interesting to see, again, the quality. And obviously Australia losing to Tonga not that long ago for the first time and getting beaten. It showed there is a shifting of the guard, so to speak. And I think the international game is getting more competitive than what it was. And seeing Great Britain lose to Papua New Guinea as well, and being completely outplayed, again, is showing a shifting from the tier 1 nations to the rest of the rugby league international setup. But the international game of rugby league needs some serious reform. They need to look at selection rules. And I've been badgered about doing a video on the Great Britain Lions and how they failed in their recent tour down under. I think there are some issues within British Rugby League and European Rugby League and the Super League. I think the NRL is still a far superior competition. Having watched as many games as I have over the last 5-6 years, I find the NRL more enjoyable to watch over the Super League. I find it a far better quality product, and the skill level and the ability of players seems to be of a higher level in the NRL than the Super League. And while Super League is starting to get some star talents coming over from Australia and New Zealand again, it's not enough to balance it out. The best British players are playing in the NRL, not the best Australian and New Zealand players playing in Super League. It's a plain and simple argument there. I think Adrian Morley started the trend of superstar European players going over to the NRL, and it has continued over the last decade or so, 2 decades. It's been a continuous slow bleeding of the top talent from the UK to Australia. I can't see that stopping somehow. But with Sonny Bill Williams going to the Toronto Wolfpack, we might see a balancing of the top talent being around the world. But there's a whole host of issues that rugby league needs to address in order for the sport to be on the same level as rugby union or even, dare I say, football or soccer, depending on how you look at it. I think that's going to be an interesting one. I think Kincaid was the right guy to sign. Or do you think we should have just went with Lindgren from the start or kept Niemi? I think Niemi's NHL career was winding down at this point. Lindgren was obviously in the organisation and they want to develop him. They do see him and Primo as a goaltending tandem for the future, or one of them as a trade piece. Primo is still a lot younger, but he's obviously been called up to give him some game time. I think Lindgren played decently. At the time, he was covering for Carey Price with Antti Niemi, but I think Antti Niemi, his career was winding down. But the fact they've lost him from the organisation entirely and lost him to the NHL entirely, if he had retired, they could have done something to keep him around that locker room as an assistant goaltending coach. But the Carey Price contract is starting to look like an absolute... I don't know what Bergevin was thinking in signing him such a big contract. I don't think it's Carey Price's fault necessarily that he has that contract. He's got a very good agent who got him a very good deal, but the organisation has overpaid, and the term he's been given is madness in the salary cap era. You cannot move that contract. You cannot move it, and I don't see Montreal being a if they do make the playoffs, it's going to be by a wild card, or they have to go on a crazy run from January onwards. They have to do a St. Louis Blues, and I don't think with the way the roster's built, without that out and out goal scorer and without that superstar talent, I don't think they're going to do it. They haven't really. There are some of all their parts. There are some good players with the Montreal Canadiens, but I don't see how they are going to be a challenger for the cup this year. And goaltending could be an issue. And if Carey Price continues to be injury prone, which is looking very likely long term, is Lindgren and Primo ready, or are they going to have to trade in for another goaltender or pick up a goalie on waivers? It's going to be interesting. Kincaid being waved down, I don't know. But having a game against Detroit could help with the confidence. Detroit hasn't won a game for forever, pretty much. I was 29 when they last won a game. I'm now 30, so there's another one in there. The Detroit Red Wings, though, I have to look. I mean, yeah, Paul Byron, they have missed him. They have missed that two-way forward who can break up the play defensively and then bring other players into play going on a counter-attack. They have missed that, I'm not going to lie. I think it will help because he was actually he was posting some good numbers before he was injured. But at the same time, I think there is a confidence issue in that dressing room. They've got on a bit of a skid. It's very difficult sometimes to break a losing attitude and a losing situation. But again, one player shouldn't affect the outcome of a team. If one player or a couple of players injured or suspended affects the outcome of a team, that shows you're top heavy. And I say this about the Oilers as well. The Edmonton Oilers, they had Ryan Nugent-Hopkins out for a couple of games with injury, and it did affect them because they had to drop Draisaitl away from McDavid and put him on the second line. So if McDavid or Draisaitl gets injured for the Oilers, they are in serious trouble. And we've seen with Montreal having a couple of players out, like a Paul Byron, who's an energy guy, have had an effect. So having I wouldn't say he's a superstar player, but he's clearly a key player for how the Montreal Canadiens play, and having him out has affected them quite badly. But you know, it's how it goes. I do think Montreal are lacking that superstar forward who can create for the other players. And Max Domi is a streaky scorer. And while he's played better at Montreal than he was at Arizona, he doesn't create enough. And I've noticed he's fighting less. So maybe having a bit more a sandpaper, telling Max Domi to be more sandpaper-like with the opposition could get something going. But I don't know. Yes, I am 30. I turned 30 last week. I'm not in my early 20s. I'm now in my early 30s. I was born in 1989. Yes. I think Trudeau's dad was still Prime Minister of Canada at the time. Yeah, that's how old I am. And a lot of things happened the week I was born of historical importance around the world. So really interesting. But yes, I am 30 years old. I'm not 20 something. I am 30 something. So if I've got good genes, I'll take that. I'll take that with a fair bit of positivity. But going back on the NHL side of things, there are certain teams that have battled through injury, and the depth players have stepped up. I think, yeah, the Drouin and Byron injuries have had an effect, but at the same time, other players haven't stepped up. Shea Weber staying healthy has been important for the defence. Sherratt has been a good addition to that defence, but at the same time, Mete is now out. So Montreal don't seem to be adapting well to injuries as well as other teams that have been decimated. This is where Pittsburgh staying relevant in the conversation is surprising, but it is showing that without Crosby and Malkin, there is some shoots for the future. Montreal, I hate to say it, they're an average team. There are some of all their parts. Some players need to play better, and defensively they've made a lot of errors. Whether Petrie stays there or gets traded out. And if Shea Weber can stay fit, but Shea Weber's near the end, is in the latter half of his career now, and he's very offensively minded. So when you have a player like Shea Weber going up the ice, the other defence partner, be it Sherratt or Petrie, needs to be further back, like a quarterback in a sense. So it's going to be interesting on the Montreal side of things. I have watched a lot of hockey, and I think a team that's really surprised me with how bad they are and how bad is Detroit. They are terrible. And the last time they won, I think the last time they won a game, I had just moved into this flat, so it's been a lengthy losing. I think it's 12 or 13 games, 14 games or something that they've lost in a row. That can't continue. I mean, I know they are in this rebuild phase, and they've had to get rid of some bad contracts, and they've got a lot of young players, but that is horrific. I'm going to have to look at record losing streaks in the NHL. And I think Detroit are actually on a record-breaking losing streak for the organisation. I don't know what the longest losing streak is in the NHL. I don't think they're there yet, but we'll see what happens. Mete, again, last season he was your best defenseman, so you have to be careful what you wish for. Obviously there will be trades occurring after Christmas. In the build-up to the trade deadline. New Jersey are a team that are not making the playoffs, and they want to offload Taylor Hall. So if there is any trade to happen with New Jersey, I think Wayne Simmons might want out as well. PK Subban hasn't worked out there, but I can't see PK Subban going back to Montreal. New Jersey do have some star players. This is, and a lot of them are defensemen or two-way forwards. So Wayne Simmons and PK Subban definitely, if they were on form and playing really well, could be trade pieces. Subban's had a complete and utter meltdown. Wayne Simmons isn't putting up the same numbers he was in Philadelphia, and Taylor Hall has, well, he was injured for most of last season. I think that's had an effect on his play this year. So if you are going to trade someone like Mete or Petrie or something like that in exchange for Will Butcher, I think you're going to have to possibly take on a Taylor Hall or a PK Subban or a Wayne Simmons kind of player going the other way. You could use a Wayne Simmons in your lineup. I think that might help spice things up, get some energy going up front. But the New Jersey Devils have sacked the coach. They're also really all over the place. They've got some bad contracts. The Taylor Hall, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. And his numbers haven't been great. He hasn't been scoring. He's been getting some assists, but he hasn't been scoring goals. I think that injury last year has definitely affected his play. But it's an interesting one. If you want to discuss the trade market, it's something that it is interesting. But again, you've got to find, again, with the salary cap, you've got to find space under the cap if you're going to trade for defence. PK, I think PK's struggles have been going on for a while and they've been getting worse. It didn't really work out at Nashville, let's be honest. He was found out defensively a lot more than he was at Montreal. And while the Nashville side was a more competitive side and had a lot of defence depth, I've noticed the last couple of years in the playoffs, he's really been exposed badly. I remember watching the Winnipeg Nashville series in the playoffs a couple of years ago, and the Winnipeg players, just the Jets players, got under his skin, put him off his game, made him look ordinary. Obviously, the salary cap being slightly lower, he was traded out of Nashville to New Jersey. It hasn't worked, let's be honest. And his high-profile relationship with Lindsey Vonn, I think he's got all these big sponsorship deals like Adidas and EA Sports. He needs to focus on playing hockey. I think there's a lot going on. And there have been, rumors about his dressing room presence. So being a distraction in the dressing room or not being, how do I put this? A positive influence in the dressing room at the teams he's been at. He is a big character, and he is when he's on his game. He's one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. Absolutely. but he's on a team which can't score. He's on a team which can't defend, and he's on a team which can't win. So, for all his attributes going forward, defensively, he's really got a really bad plus minus. I hate plus minus. A lot of hockey fans don't put a lot of faith in plus minus. But if you're looking at a snapshot of a period of time, his periods on the ice, they're conceding more goals than they score. And defensively, he's all over the place. He's clearly playing on a team that the confidence is gone. There isn't a lot of confidence in that dressing room. There's not a lot of positivity in that dressing room. But could a change of scenery help? It's a possibility, but again, big contract. Who's going to want to take that cap hit, considering that the salary cap this season is lower than expected, and you've got to build a team that can. If you are going to add a superstar defenseman who's having an off year or a couple of years, is that going to, can that change of scenery spark something in Pico Subban, or is that going to drag the rest of the team down? Taylor Hall's only made the playoffs once. He spent a lot of time in Edmonton in the losing spell, and while Edmonton are doing reasonably well now, they're starting to lose games again, and they are a top-heavy team. Taylor Hall, it's an interesting one. Yeah, but they said that about Ryan O'Reilly, and then he wins the cup with St. Louis. There was a curse for him. They say it about Matt Duchene. There's a curse with him. I just think with the amount of parity in the league now and the amount of talent in the league now, it's getting harder and harder to win. And with more players playing the game at the NHL level and the league being bigger than what it was when Taylor Hall first joined, with Vegas joining. I don't know. I don't think there's a curse. I do think, though, that he has unfortunately been playing on teams that aren't very good. I don't think it's necessarily him being cursed. I think the organisations he's played for in the Oilers and the Devils haven't been very good teams. Let's be plain and honest here. The Oilers have mismanaged their draft prospects tremendously over the last decade or so. They've made an absolutely ham-fisted attempt of developing their top prospects, and only 3 of their first-round draft picks are still there in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl, and McDavid. And if one of those guys goes down, as we've seen with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, the team is less effective. They've mismanaged a whole host of. Jesse Puljujarvi is a prime example of a first-round draft pick who they've mismanaged completely, who's not actually currently with the organisation, even though his rights are owned by the organisation. He's gone back to Finland. So you have to look at the organisation that he's playing for and how it's not working out. Because it's not just a Taylor Hall thing. I think it's a New Jersey Devils thing that PK Subban, his numbers have completely collapsed, and he's been a regular playoff performer for years, and he's been to a Stanley Cup final. So you have to look at the players that are there. Wayne Simmons not having a great season. You have to look at the players at New Jersey, and you have to look at the New Jersey organization over the last 4 or 5 years, and it hasn't been great. Corey Schneider's numbers have disappeared. He's fallen off a cliff. They have got some really good players in New Jersey, and they're losing games. So that says there's more than just one player having a curse. I think that's a far bigger issue, far deeper issue than just Taylor Hall. There is that rumor linking him to a move to Colorado. I don't see where you can fit him into the Colorado lineup. I really can't. They've already got a very solid lineup from top to bottom. Rantanen, Landeskog, all that. They have already got those kind of players that Taylor Hall kind of is in place, and they're playing really well and they're playing with confidence. I don't see where you add him to that lineup. I really don't. And while they're saying it's a great fit, I don't see where you add him. And I don't see how they're going to be happy losing a player to get Taylor Hall. They're going to lose a lot of prospects as well. And they've got a very young team. Their prospect system's working really well. They've come through their wobbly patch with their record-breakingly bad season a couple of years ago. They've bounced back. I don't see where Taylor Hall fits into that side. Even though the rumour is there, I don't see how that works. I can see Taylor Hall going to a side as a rental, but I think Colorado already have the team in place to make a good push for the Stanley Cup this year. I don't see where they're going to add him. And if they're going to give up a player, they're going to have to give up a prospect and draft picks as well. I don't see them willing to do that for a player whose numbers have been dropping off a cliff. I really don't. You love the fact that I like both rugby league and rugby union. I've played both codes. I'm a big fan of both league and union. I'm more a fan of rugby union at international level and rugby league at club level. Um, it's an interesting one. I'm a massive fan of Major League Rugby in the US. I've really enjoyed watching the first couple of seasons of Major League Rugby. I think a lot of people were expecting it to fail, and it's growing. So that's a real positive thing for North American Rugby Union. It's a pity that the Canadians have declined as a national side over the last 5, 6, 7 years. They've really struggled. But it is good to see that the US are a solid team now. Uruguay are a solid team now. It's really good to see those sides really well improving year on year. Hopefully, the Canadians can bounce back and be more competitive than they have been. But no, I enjoy watching both codes, and I think it's good fun. Watching it is good fun. I don't see Edmonton going back to Taylor Hall. And the way it ended with Taylor Hall in Edmonton wasn't a positive note. I know the organisation is different now than the organisation he was playing for, with the new GM, new coaching setup with Dave Tippett. But I think Taylor Hall was just going to go on at some point between now and the trade deadline. He's probably going to go as a free agent. If a change of scene is what's necessary, good. But I also think his fitness is another concern. He did miss a lot of last year injured. That's obviously had an impact on his play. His numbers haven't been great this season, let's not lie. And his numbers haven't been great since he came back from injury. So fitness needs to be looked at. I don't know where he ends up. I don't know what team you fit him on. And I don't know what organisation will be willing to give up pieces for a Taylor Hall type player who is a star player who's having a real bad run of form. Because if that bad run of form happens with the team he goes to and that affects their playoff chances and their playoff run, that GM is going to look like an absolute idiot, and the Devils will have got rid of a bad contract. So the Devils will win that trade, absolutely. The Devils will win that trade, getting rid of Hall. But they also have to look at PK Subban and Wayne Simmons and some other pieces, because it's more than just Taylor Hall not playing well at New Jersey. It's the whole team not playing well. And they've got some young prospects coming through. Goaltending's been a bit of a concern at New Jersey as well. That's an organisation that could be a bottom feeder for quite some time. And I fear the same for Detroit as well. The Senators, however, have been more competitive than people realised. So there's some bright shoots for the Senators with the team they have, and those players are outperforming what people expect of them on paper. So that's an interesting one. Corey Schneider, I think he is shot at New Jersey. Again, I think it's a player who needs to get out. Again, it's a bad contract. Whether he goes to Europe, he could definitely fit in a European league. It's a different style of hockey. If he was to go to Switzerland or Scandinavia, that could be interesting. On the Russia side of things, if I can talk to you, Chester, they've been banned from international sporting competition for 4 years, so it's all well and good for them massively increasing their annual budget to 30 or 40 million euros a year, or however much they're putting in, and trying to increase their league participation. But they're banned from playing international competition, so they're banned from qualifying for the next World Cup. They're at the moment. The Russia internationally are banned from all international sporting competitions, so that affects their football and rugby teams. And they also play rugby league in Russia as well. So while the federation and the government are wanting to pump this money in, they can't play internationally, and so therefore, what happens? So we'll see what happens with the Russians, and yeah, Romania and Germany obviously are those other European nations that get regularly overlooked after Georgia. But unfortunately, I think the Russians are if they're going to have to go with this little three-way tournament similar to the Six Nations, they're going to have to appeal their international ban. Now, the Russian Rugby Union, there is no, I don't think there's any doping or any doping violations in Russian Rugby Union. There isn't the money, and they're not good enough. but the international ban handed down by WADA is there. And the US anti-doping authority have already come out and criticised the ban by WADA, saying it's not long enough. They want to do even tougher, which is very hypocritical from the US anti-doping agency, considering that every US college is a doping program. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. There's some politics in there. It's an ongoing issue. It's been ongoing for years. It's a battle between. It's sort of like a Cold War in sports with the Russians, and it's been an ongoing battle for a very, very long time. And there doesn't seem to be an end to that kind of ongoing. Are they going to appeal? Not going to appeal? We could possibly see certain sports teams of international level for the Russians have appeals accepted. I do hope that in that case, if it's a club tournament similar to the European Champions Cup, then yeah, the Russian teams are allowed to compete. But at an international level, no, they're banned. So it's gonna be interesting to see if this ban does transcend to club level sports as well, like the Football Champions League, like this rugby union competition they're coming up with. It's going to be interesting, but on an international standpoint, they can't play in the next World Cup. They can't qualify for it. They can't have any autumn tests. Russia are in the wilderness, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Do I think Pajot returns there this offseason? They will have the cap space to sign him. He's playing really well. He's part of the reason why they're being as competitive they are. Pajot, will he fit in the Montreal setup? And will he get the same responsibility he's having at the Senators, where he's a top-line forward rather than being a third-line forward? He seems to be relishing his new role at the Senators, and he seems to be producing some really good numbers. So I can't see him wanting to change roles and get less ice time. And I think he's going to stay at the Senators, and I think they are going to keep him around. He might even take a hometown discount. And Montreal have other issues. They need to have a superstar player rather than a player like Pajot, who's more of a two-way forward, who's just having a really good season. I think Montreal need that superstar goal scorer or superstar centre who can create. I think Pajot, while he's playing really well with the Senators, it's because the Senators, the way they're set up, it suits his style of play, and he suits their style of play. I don't think it's the same style of play at Montreal. Montreal have a different situation altogether. So we'll see what happens in that respect. I think it will be interesting to see what happens around the trade deadline. It will also be interesting to see what happens with free agency, be it restricted or unrestricted, after the last summer's mess when it came to free agency and players really holding out. I don't think that Pajot would want to go to a team like Detroit. Detroit's in an utter mess, and their losing streak. I feel sorry for some of these young players like Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi. Tyler Bertuzzi could fit in any side because he's got that aggression, but he's also got that goal scoring ability. And Theasiu, Mantha, they've got some young players in Detroit. I think the Senators have a lot more optimism about them than the Red Wings do. Even when they're losing games, they bounce back, whereas Detroit lose games and continues to lose games and continue to lose games. And there doesn't seem to be a way to break this losing streak. Now, Montreal have a very, very good chance to put a beating on Detroit, a big beating on Detroit, and that could lift Montreal's confidence. Detroit are in an utter tailspin, and they could go on and not win a single game for the remainder of the season. I can see a lot of those players who are currently in Detroit wanting to be traded out at the deadline. They haven't really got a direction with Detroit. And I know Stevie Yzerman is now the GM after moving from Tampa. He's got his work cut out over the next 3-4 years to really fix that team. And the organisation have to give Stevie Yzerman the time to bring pieces in as well. He's got some... Zadina is good. But again, if you're throwing in these prospects into a losing situation, it's going to be like another Edmonton or another Buffalo where they have a long period of time of losing. They need to get a couple of players who've won Stanley Cups or been playoff performers over the last 5-10 years in the organisation to give that winning mentality back, because these young players, if they continue to lose regularly, they're going to have that losing mentality and that losing mindset, and that's going to damage their development and damage their chances of getting out of this basement that they're in. Back into competitive, a competitive kind of position where they are on the upswing. We've seen it with Edmonton. We've seen it with Buffalo. We're seeing it with New Jersey as well. When you have that long-term losing it affects the organisation when the team aren't even close to being a playoff team. 7 wins and we're nearly halfway through the season. Just work that one out. 7 wins and we're nearly halfway through the season. I haven't seen a team this bad for a long, long time. And I thought Colorado were bad a couple of years ago, but this is something else. Even when Buffalo were tanking for McDavid, they still had, games where they could score 5-6 goals and lose. Yeah, they did draft well the last couple of years, but when you're throwing in these young players into a situation before they're ready, or into a losing situation when they're still developing, I don't know what, Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi, for example, and Athanasiou and Mantha are their leadership core, basically. Zetterberg's gone. Cromwell's gone. Bernier is trying his best to keep the scoreline acceptable, and it's not on him in goal. There's not enough players who've got Stanley Cup rings on that team or got playoff experience or been in a winning above 500 team. They need to trade for players who have got some veteran experience, played on teams that are competitive in the last couple of years. They need to figure something out, because I fear that if they don't, GMs are going to come calling about Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi and going, okay, we'll have these players. And when you start doing like an Edmonton, mishandling your draft picks that have come in quite high, or you do a Buffalo, I think it's a very risky game, tanking. I don't think they're tanking. I just generally think they've got on this skid and they are generally bad, because the way they've changed the lottery picks and the way they've changed the percentages of chance of getting a lottery, first overall, it's a dangerous game. Because a team, let's say, I don't know, let's have a look at LA could pick him up. For example, LA are also that bad right now, and are going through a downswing in their fortunes. It's a very risky game to play, considering that it's even harder to get the first overall. They've really mixed the lottery up. I personally think they need to change the draft system completely and make it all 31 teams get thrown in the pot. Much like how we pick out our FA Cup draw, where you just put all the numbers, all the balls in the pot, and you pull out, right, this team is drafting 31st, this team's drafting 30th, 29th, and going down. But that's my personal view on how they should fix the lottery, make it a pure lottery for all 31 teams, where all teams have an equal chance to draft first overall or 31st in the first round. And then you go from league finishing positions for rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's my personal opinion. To make it a pure lottery. So while the odds are still heavily favouring the team that finishes last overall, they are less than what they were when Buffalo and Edmonton were tanking for McDavid. And that's why they brought the change of the lottery rules in, to stop teams deliberately tanking. I don't think Detroit are literally tanking. They are just terrible, because there are other teams above them who, almost if the Senators get him first overall, or the Ducks, or I'm trying to think of other teams that are outside the playoffs that could be thrown in the lottery mix. There are other teams that could definitely pick him up and make Detroit look even more stupid. I also think the draft isn't as strong this year as well, so they've got to be very, very careful about being in this position. They've got to start winning games soon for the health of the players' development. Getting a win will really boost the confidence. And I don't see them getting a win anytime soon, unless they start listening to calls from other GMs about one or two of their star players, just to get pieces in that can stabilise the situation. Puljujarvi, he's been at Edmonton and didn't work out there, and that's a losing organisation with only one playoff appearance in however long. And Edmonton mishandled him. He obviously wants to play in the NHL. I think he would take any team other than Edmonton right now, but they can't do anything with him until next year, or next season, because obviously he didn't play a game before I think December the 2nd or whatever it was. So he's in Finland for the rest of the season. His rights can be traded, but he can't join the team until next training camp. So if Detroit or LA, one of the teams that are struggling right now really badly, or New Jersey were to trade for Puljujarvi, that's great. He can't play for the team until next season anyway, so it doesn't help them right now. And these teams need help right now, at least to be a more positive environment and get some wins going, get some confidence going, and actually be competitive. Because I hate tanking. This is an issue with the draft system, is when teams deliberately lose games or don't play as well to try and get prospects going forward. It's how match fixing starts. It's how spot fixing starts. This is where I think the draft system needs to completely change for the first round to a complete and utter 100% lottery for all 31 teams. And a lot of fan bases hate me saying that. In fact, most hockey fans hate me saying that. I've had the discussion with, but I think it's the only way to stop teams tanking. But I don't think Detroit are tanking. I think Detroit are genuinely that bad a team that they don't know what they're doing. Nolan Patrick, there are some players who are injury prone, and it does affect their development and their career path. They need to look at the injuries, and if they're repeat injuries on the same, it's like concussions. If a player keeps having concussions regularly, then his career is done. Nolan Patrick, they need to look at definitely the injury concerns that he has, and that's down to the team doctor as well, and the team's physio department, and assessing and making sure that they can fix something. But we have seen players who've had lots of injury concerns move to another team, and this is in a variety of sports, and those injuries not reoccur, and then a change of scene and a change of team doctor, and they go, actually, we can find a way to figure out how to fix things. But again, repeat injuries to the same area of the body's going to break down. It's going to be less effective. It's not going to heal as well. And then you have to manage things. So, oh yeah, Juleson. Yeah, no, he hasn't come back. But that was a bad injury last year. Concussion is one of those things where you can have 5 or 6 concussions and still play, and one concussion and you're done. We are learning more about things like concussion each day, and when you have ex players, coming out and discussing CTE, the CTE lawsuit in the NFL and the NHL, and it's starting to get into rugby union and rugby league as well. It has to be taken more seriously than it is, and I do think professional sport as a whole is starting to take things more seriously. It's not that players are going to get concussed. We know that. It's not that players aren't going to get injured and aren't aware of that. We know that. And for those who say, take fighting out of hockey, no, it's not. That's not the point. The point is this. It's the player welfare and the management of injuries. And this is where the league has failed for 20, 30, 40 years, where they haven't managed injuries correctly. They haven't looked after the players. Can you still skate? Yes, you're playing. But I've got a broken hand. But you're playing. But I can't hold my stick. You're playing. As long as... let's say you've got a defensive forward or a defensive defenseman who's not really a puck handling guy, you think of this: he's broken his hand in a fight, or he's had a hit and he's dislocated his shoulder. Can he still skate? Yes. Can he still hit with the other shoulder or the other hand? Yes. You're playing. That was the attitude. I've got a bit of bruising on my arm. I think I've damaged. I can't. My shoulder's a bit stiff today. Can you still throw a body check? Yeah, you're playing. That was the attitude of coaches, and same with concussion. Can you still skate? Yeah, but I'm having like headaches and dizzy spells. Can you still skate? Yeah, you're playing. That was the attitude. Now, I think teams need to be more transparent with the injuries that their players suffer. So when they say upper body, lower body, concussion, facial lacerations, whatever it is, when they say upper lower body, you assume upper body, it's probably a shoulder, a neck, or a concussion. When they say lower body, it's a knee or an ankle. Just say he's broken his leg. Just say he's dislocated his shoulder. Just say he's concussed. I think they also need to be more transparent with reporting the injuries. And I do feel sorry for Juleson. I remember when the injury happened. again, we've seen it in rugby union players over the last 12 months. We've had a lot of players retire due to concussion. High profile players as well. It's not as if they're squad players. These are high profile internationals who've gone, I'm done. Who've missed out on World Cup. Type in a guy called Pat Lambie. He retired midway through last season. Called it a day. He had a concussion. He used to play without a scrum cap, and then you noticed he's playing with a scrum cap a lot. And he had several concussions, and he was done. He's the same age as me, and he's done. Midway through his career, he's done. Lee Halfpenny, Welsh rugby union player, had to see a specialist. He's had multiple concussions, and he still has a real bad tackle technique. There's some big superstar rugby league players. Yeah, concussion and repeat injuries have had an effect, and they've had to retire a lot sooner than they would have wanted. If you follow rugby, if you want to watch a bit of the NRL, Sam Burgess, massive player for both Great Britain, England, and the South Sydney Rabbitohs, retired at the end of the season. He retired medical. Partly he was getting suspended a lot as well, but he's had a lot of injuries, especially. He played the 2014 grand final with a broken cheekbone. He suffered the injury after 30 seconds and played the entire final with a broken face. Do I think Jeff Petrie stays longer now because of Jawson's injury? Because on the right side, we've got nobody else other than Fleury. Josh Brook has been non-existent about this season. I think the veteran defenseman you have, you're going to want to keep him. But at the same time, you bring in Sherratt, who's a left-hander. You've got Petrie, who's a right-hander. They're both defensive defensemen. Mete is now injured, so Shea Weber's the offensive defenseman you've got. I think you need to possibly bring in one or two more pieces to make that blue line a better, more effective blue line. I think this is why Montreal are struggling defensively, is they haven't got a settled six-man decor with a seventh defenseman spare who can play on either side. That they are lacking defensive depth. Not as bad as some other teams, but they are lacking a little bit in places. And people are going, the Jets, they've got no defence core. Look at our record. If we've got no defensive core, how are we one of the best teams in the Central with the record that we have in the last 6 weeks? It's because players are stepping up. This is where I think the Montreal organisation, players are not playing to their potential. And there's also a lack of depth. And that, again, lies with Mark Bergevin. And when you lose players like PK Subban, and even a Barbario, who's a depth defenseman, when you trade these pieces out and injuries take a toll, and you've only got two right-handed defensemen who can play in the top six, you've got a problem. Big problem. You're missing a right-handed defenseman. So I think, again, we're going to see some movement on the trade block. We're going to see some movement. But the players that are dominating the trade talk is just Taylor Hall and PK Subban. They're dominating the trade talk because they're not playing very well where they are. The Paul Yarby situation is continuing. And would Edmonton want to give up a right-handed defenseman with Paul Yarby and another prospect? Doubtful. Doubtful. But we'll see what happens. I think Olsner might have to go up to the Canadians from the Rockets. I think that might have to be a thing that's done in order to at least give some more depth on the blue line. But I don't know enough about the AHL to really pass comment on the prospect pool of every team. The only AHL teams that I follow are the Tucson Roadrunners and the Winnipeg Manitoba Moose. But I think the AHL does get overlooked a lot, and the ECHL as well. They get overlooked a lot. They don't get the look in that I think they deserve. when it comes to TV rights and games being shown overseas. I think they could do more. The NHL could do more to showcase the affiliate leagues that you know develop the players for the NHL. It'd be great over here in the UK if we got the AHL and ECHL on TV. I think it'd be really great at showcasing how big the sport is in North America. But at the same time, each team has obviously got its affiliate, or teams might share an affiliate. But I think it doesn't get the press coverage. So a lot of people who, unless you're really hardcore and you're really a stats nerd, and you live locally to the AHL, ECHL affiliate over in the US or Canada, a lot of people just don't follow as much as they could. And there's some good hockey being played, and there's some good players playing at that level, and everyone thinks to be a quality player of any level, you've got to play in the NHL. For me, I support hockey at all levels. All levels. I think I think it could get more exposure, and it would help the game, especially in the US, grow massively if the AHL and ECHL got more exposure with TV deals and media rights deals. I think that would help. Eric Comrie, interesting. He was traded from the Jets. He was picked up by the Coyotes from the Jets, ironically, the former Jets and the new Jets on waivers. And I think Winnipeg made a mistake getting rid of Comrie. I really do. They wanted obviously to reassign him to the AHL, to the Manitoba Moose, and Arizona went, we'll have him. It didn't work out in Arizona. Antti Raanta has stayed remarkably fit this season, and Darcy Kemper is lights out, and there's a reason why they're top of the Pacific. And I think they're going to possibly get on a roll now and run away with the Pacific Division. Detroit, it's a mess in Detroit. He played his first game against Winnipeg, and they were battered 5-1. And it wasn't even a fair fight at this point. It was really not fair. I'm not gonna lie, it was painful for them. I feel he's bounced around a fair bit. I think he just wants to get settled. Personally, if a player is going to develop and he's moved now, he's played for his third. This is his third organisation he's been with in the space of 6 months. That can have an effect on the player. Some players seem to love the journeyman kind of going from team to team, season to season to season. Other players, it really affects them, because you've got to remember these guys have got families and other interests outside of hockey as well, and being moved around a lot is a massive impact for them and a massive effect on them. It's not as easy as people think, being traded and waived so many times. That's a lot of moving around, and that does have an effect on a player. Now, hopefully, Detroit keep him long term, and they work with him long term. He's now played for them at the NHL level, so he's got that under his belt. It gives Bernier a bit of time off, because he's just been shelled every night, and Bernier is a better goalkeeper than I think his numbers suggest, but he's a confidence guy, and I think he needs a break from being battered every night, pillar to post. But I think Detroit have a lot of other issues. They are generally that bad. We have to look at how the team's made up and why they are where they are. And they are where they are because they won too much, if you know what I mean. They were too consistent. They didn't have that one season where they missed the playoffs by a few points. They were in the playoffs every year from 1991 through to, I think, 2016. 25 solid years, or 2017, 25 solid seasons in the playoffs. That on every other team in the NHL has had that a couple of seasons here or there where they've just narrowly missed, and they have to bounce back. I do think Detroit being that consistent for that long has actually long term damaged the team now. I don't know what's gone on with Calvin Pickard. I think Calvin Pickard might be done as an NHL goaltender. And I hate saying that. I hate hearing people go, oh, he's done at this level. Oh, he's no good. I think Pickard and Michael Hutchinson as well is another goaltender whose confidence is shot to hell. Maybe Calvin Pickard's future lies in Europe if he wants to. Because Pickard's not that old. But But I feel sorry for him in a sense because he played decently in Colorado when Colorado were absolutely shockingly bad. He kept scorelines respectful and won them a few games as well. I feel sorry for Pickard, but I think Vegas picking him up in the expansion draft and then trading him straight away for Subban tells you something. Malcolm Subban has come good. Yeah, he's stepped in when Marc-Andre Fleury had to take some personal time for his dad's passing, and he won most of those games. I think he only lost one game in that spell where they won 6 and lost 1. So Malcolm Subban clearly has come good. Calvin Pickard was picked up from Colorado in the expansion draft in 2017. Never played a game. Within a few days of being picked up, he was traded. And Malcolm Subban came in, and I forget where Pickard was traded out. Subban comes in, or he was waived out. I don't know if they waived him or traded him out. And he was with the Vegas organization for about 3-4 days. He's bounced around since then. That's got to affect your confidence massively. It'll be interesting to see if he gets traded out of the Detroit organization, or if he sticks in Grand Rapids and puts some decent numbers. But his numbers at Grand Rapids haven't been amazing. But I feel sorry for him. I do. But he's playing on he's part of a team that just can't win. Oh no, they did fire their entire coaching. They cleared house. A good friend of mine, my friend Dave from work, he's a Sharks fan, and San Jose, I think, again, a very consistent playoff team for a very long time. Not as successful as Detroit. They've only got the one Stanley Cup final, but a very consistent playoff team for a very, very long time. It's falling apart there as well. They've got some really... I think they're missing Marlowe. I think they're missing Pavelski. Well, they brought Marlowe back, but he's over 40 now. Joe Thornton, he's one knee injury away from retirement, or one little twinge away from retirement. Having Evgeny Nabokov as goalie coach is, I think, a good thing. He knows the organisation. It's an interesting one. It is really, really interesting to discuss all this stuff. But yeah, they had a complete coaching clear out. Jones and Dell as a goalie tandem, it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. We'll have to see if the coaching change helps, and if they can develop. I think we have to see what goes on with the coaching changes there. Jones and Dell, I mean, their numbers haven't been great, but the team in front of them has got some bad contracts. I don't think Burns and Carlson as a pairing is just defensive suicide. One's a traffic cone and one can barely skate because he's injured all the time. Big contracts, big numbers. We'll have to see what happens. We'll see if Evgeny Nabokov can inspire some confidence in the goalie tandem. They haven't called up any of the AHL affiliate goalies, so it has been Jones and Dell. They've not been injured, so they've been fit and healthy. I don't know. I don't know what they do. I honestly don't know if a change of scene for one of them improves their numbers. Is the history buffing still going? Yes, it is. I just haven't done any videos on there for a while. But I do have to do a game review on the new Call of Duty. And I will do some other history-based videos on some other bits and pieces. There's actually more than one Treaty of Versailles as well. There's, I think, 5 of them. So I've got to do a video on all of them, and that'd be interesting to go, the Treaties of Versailles. Which one are we talking about? But yeah, the history buffing's still going. I just haven't done much on it for a while. But I haven't really had the energy to do it. I mean, but it is still going. It is still there. I have to do some stuff over Christmas Day and Boxing Day. I'll do some videos, I think, because I've got those 2 days off work. So I know the only 2 days off work I get over the Christmas period. So I am very, very busy over the festive time. But it means good money. But the history buffing is still going. I might be doing some urban exploring in the new year with my friend Rob. Collaboration with his channel. We might be doing some urban exploring. So keep your eyes peeled for a few a few videos coming up on that. We found where I've moved to, there are a few abandoned houses and other abandoned buildings floating around that we could explore. So there might be some more urban exploring videos coming up in the new year. But there are some other videos planned for the History Channel. Yeah, snooker's getting less and less coverage on terrestrial TV, and it's a sport that I enjoy as well. I play it. I used to play it a lot, and 8 ball pool. If you watch Free Sports, they do show the international pool tournaments. So the 8 ball pool, they do show that on Free Sports. So that does get some coverage on free to air TV. But yes, snooker is a sport that there are less tournaments being shown out of percentage, but there's more tournaments being played. You can thank the Hearn family for that. Snooker is one of those. I wouldn't call it a niche sport. It's an easy sport to take up, but it's much like darts. Snooker is a cue sport. It's like 8 ball pool, bigger tables, more balls. It's different rules. There's different rules, but if you play 8 ball pool or English pool, bigger table, but the same principle is obviously to pop more balls and get more points than your opponent. Plain and simple. It's a bit more complicated than pool or 8 ball pool. But it's where pool comes from. It's derivative of snooker, and billiards. It was invented in India by the British Army over in India. It's actually an Indian word. It's based on an old sport called carom board, which is another Indian sport which I also play, where you have to obviously pot balls into a pocket or discs. Derek Akora. No, we're not doing a Derek Akora and faking that there's ghosts. We're just going around old houses. That's basically what we're doing on the other channel. My friend Rob has his own YouTube channel that I'm going to do some collaboration with him, go exploring with him, and then he can put a link to my channel in his channel description and see if we can grow both channels together. We're doing a little collab, but we have to be careful because one of the buildings is an old terrace which has got my friend's pub at the end of it. The pub is still open for another few months before that gets shut down. We have to be a bit careful. The building itself that we want to look at is it's lethal. Basically, there's a few other buildings floating around, so we're going to look at doing that in the new year after Christmas because he runs his own pub and he's got a very busy period coming up over the next month or so. I'm busy with work over the next month or so. Then I've got a lot of holiday that I'm due to take, so it's going to be interesting to see when I get some time off in the new year, looking at doing some videos for the other channel, and also I want to do some more sports history videos as well. Get the whiteboard out and do some content. And I've got to try and work out with the space that I have in the flat to make some content. But no, the snooker is one of those sports that is having issues with its terrestrial and free to wear. So I say terrestrial is your standard Freeview, then you've got FreeSat, and then you have Sky. Yeah. We'll have to see what happens with the TV rights for a lot of sports because Sky is going through a restructuring here in the UK in 2021, so in 2 years' time, or a year and a half's time, with the Comcast buyout. There's a lot of TV rights deals up in 2021 to 2024 in that period. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with any potential restructuring of sports packages. BT Sport continues to lose money. Amazon wants to buy more sports rights, even though they post losses every year. So watch your Amazon Prime subscription go up to pay for that, which is why I'm glad I don't have Amazon Prime. Thank you. And then you've got some sports need restructuring financially anyway. We've discussed rugby league. We've looked at football's got some issues. We haven't even discussed football stuff. I've just mentioned Ancelotti's available on the manager market. I haven't even mentioned that Jurgen Klopp and Steven Gerrard both have signed extensions through to 2024 with their respective clubs. That tells you something about Gerrard and Klopp's futures. Whether Klopp decides to stay and have a long period of time at Liverpool, or Gerrard is groomed as his successor. That's an interesting one. So we'll have to see what happens with Rangers and Gerrard and Klopp and Liverpool. Fishing. There was a thing on when because Barry Hearn's a big fishing fan. He did come up with the angling competition, didn't he? With the Angling Times and the Mirror, and in the early 90s on pay per view TV. But that's such a niche sport. You wouldn't necessarily get the viewership, and whether it deserves more mainstream attention or not, animal rights activists will kick up a fuss. They already kick up a fuss with horse racing and greyhound racing. We know that, and equestrianism in general. Um, and with I don't know whether it's a sport that long term has a viable future. We have to protect and fishing. The amount of stress put on those animals when some keep them out of the water too long. Uh, I don't know enough about you know fly fishing or angling to make a judgment on it, but I don't see it um, being as mainstream as it could be. But Barry Hearn in the early 90s made a lot of money out of it. But we'll see. Crosby and Malkin, that they're showing even without them this season when they've been injured at various points that they can still win. So I think, yes, there is some bright hope for the future. But the thing is with Pittsburgh, much like Detroit before them, they've spent so long in the playoffs that when they do miss out that first season, can they get back that second season? They've had a lengthy period of playoff appearances and success. So it's going to be interesting if they get a good trade in there, but they pick up a first round draft pick from another team that ends up having a bad season where they can draft quite early on. They've got to do some trades, I think, to bring in a few more prospects in the first round. I think Galchenyuk, it looks like he's on the way out as well. It hasn't worked with him. He could end up being bounced out the league and playing in Europe. So we'll see on that. On the football side of things, yeah, Mourinho was hired by Tottenham very, very quickly after Pochettino was sacked. That had been lined up for a good month or so. It didn't work out at Man United for a variety of reasons. I honestly think there are issues within the Man United organisation, and it's to do with ownership, much like Arsenal. Arsenal, now Ancelotti is available. Arsenal should be busting a gut to get him in as manager before the transfer window opens on the 1st of January. Busting a gut. Everton are linked with David Moyes. I think that's a step back for Everton. They're in a relegation fight. Arsenal, they need to seriously consider offering Ancelotti a position, or Pochettino, one or the other. They're both available. Ancelotti would be my first choice as a manager to go to Arsenal. Pochettino, having coached at Tottenham, I don't think how the fans would warm to that. But I'm surprised that Ancelotti hasn't had offers from Arsenal. Really surprised. Tottenham, it's been about a month now, 3 weeks. There have been a lot of sackings, actually. There's been 5 or 6 managers sacked over the last few weeks. There's been a lot of turnover in a very short space of time. Watford, Everton, Tottenham, Arsenal, they're the 4 in the Premier League. Napoli in Europe. These are the big ones. I mean, there's been loads, but these are the ones that have made the headlines in the last 3 weeks. So yeah, there's been a lot of movement there. Oh yeah, no, Pittsburgh haven't had to really use the draft table. I think Pittsburgh are going to have to be very, 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 very crafty in the trade kind of on the trade table. I think when it comes to trading, I think Pittsburgh are going to have to, the Penguins are going to have to really Pittsburgh are going to have to be very, very crafty with their trading. They're going to have to pick up draft picks and not lottery protected ones. They're going to have to pick up draft picks and they're going to have to trade up for them, which means they might have to give over some good pieces to get draft picks, but they need to start building for the future or signing free agents or even undrafted players through the ECHL and AHL. They've got to find some talent from somewhere to add to that pool of prospects. Because yeah, when Crosby and Malkin do go and they are in trouble. There are a lot of lakes and rivers in the UK that are competition ready in the sense that they have good fishing stock, but at the same time, Some landowners want to protect their land, and that is, justifiable. And a lot of these rivers and lakes are also in prime farming locations or in national parks, and we've seen a lot of people, a lot of in the news about wildlife protection and the fact that 1 in 7 UK species are now endangered or at risk. And when you have a lot of people, trampling around the countryside, it is something that needs to be an outdoor sport like that, which does use the outdoor environment, needs to be done in a sustainable fashion. But at the same time, I don't see how it can be mainstream and make a lot of money. I really don't. I think, well, I know a lot of people who go fishing for fun and as a hobby. It's whether that landowner can actually make some money out of the competition, and if the landowner is willing to go, okay, I'm willing to have hundreds, if not thousands, of people traipsing around on my land, damaging my land. Because we've look at what, when you have music festivals and rally, and let's say motorsport, let's say rallying events, and landowners' property gets damaged, who pays for it? And that's something that does annoy property owners when an event is used on their property and the damage is done by the general public or the actual event itself. So rallying in motorsport, there's some of the crashes that happen especially when they're on the dirt tracks and they go through a farmer's fence. Hey, you've got to think about this. That's the farmer's fence. He has to keep his livestock in that field. He now has to pay to have that fence replaced. Or do the organisers? This is a grey area where do the organisers pay for some of the damage? Does the landowner's insurance pay for it? It's something that it needs to be thought about long and hard. Latrell Mitchell, I think he could go anywhere as long as the team has cap space. He could end up in Super League. We've seen with Sonny Bill Williams going to Toronto, he could very well end up in Super League. It's Latrell Mitchell watch over the next couple of weeks. It's a shame the Roosters can't keep him, but salary cap being what it is, he would fit in, I think, in any team. He's a superstar. He really is. He could go anywhere. He's a state of origin player now. He's a grand final winner 2 years in a row. He could go anywhere. I think he would want to stay in the Sydney area, so that may limit where he goes if he wants to stay in Australia. But we should have a look at Latrell Mitchell, and we'll have to have a look at the NRL at the turn of the year. I'm going to look at the NRL going into January and February, and we're going to have a look at that point, because right now, as things stand, I think it's still the off season. There's going to be a lot of movement over the next little while. There's going to be a lot of players moving around. The Super League season starts in 2.5 months. So if he's going to go to Super League, he's got to make a decision middle of January at the latest. The World Cup Challenge is in, I think, the first week in March, and then the NRL season starts. So he's got to make a decision if he's going to move to the Super League soon. But let's get Christmas out the way, and then we can figure out where players like Mitchell and other players who are out of contract are going to end up. There's going to be a lot of player movement. We've seen some players like Matt Gillett and Sam Burgess retire because of injury. So players are retiring, players are coming off contracts. There's been some issues with some further player indiscipline in the off season, which the NRL was hoping to avoid. And there's a lot of issues going on with a lot of clubs financially. It's going to be interesting to see who goes where. But Latrell Mitchell's got obviously the big name. And with Sonny Bill already getting signed by Toronto, he could get up in Toronto if he wants to go to a Super League team that has a budget. The money Latrell Mitchell will command, there are issues with finances and salary cap and money in the European game. So he most likely stays in Australia. And if he does go to the European Super League, he probably ends up in Canada at the Toronto Wolfpack. But they will have to make a decision after Christmas. I don't see anything being done now, but the time frame is shortening. As soon as Christmas is done, the time frame shortens considerably to a few weeks where he would have to be signed. Cahoon in Pittsburgh, Marta in Chicago. Pittsburgh, they've definitely gained something there with a good solid player for their depth. Chicago, they're looking like they're still needing to rebuild massively. I could not tell you too much. I get on these players. I don't follow every team religiously, but I'm noticing certain teams are really on a downswing, and other teams are flirting with the downswing. I think Pittsburgh, it's not much longer before they do have to start looking at bringing in more prospects, and trading for draft picks, and trading for draft prospects, and doing some depth trades to keep the lineup fresh. They need to add a bit of youth to that lineup. Chicago, they've had their period of success. They're also going through a period of rebuilding. Pittsburgh have been lucky in that respect that they haven't had to do that for the last decade or so. They're going to have to start considering it soon. Esports, yeah, that's something that I want to talk about, because I actually do have, obviously, the latest copy of Modern Warfare on Call of Duty, and I've been playing on, obviously, Xbox Live. My neighbour downstairs in my block of flats is a far better player than me, by the way, on this Call of Duty. I mean, I'm still playing Advanced Warfare at a high level, but Modern Warfare, different style of game. I think it's going to be interesting. I think esports, I have to do a video on it at some point. I've been saying I've got to do this for a while. I've got to have to properly research this esports thing. I have to properly research. But I've come across guys online who clearly play esports. The top gamer online is got a Twitch account. It's a Twitch gamer who's clearly streaming when he plays. So yeah, I have come across guys on Advanced Warfare when I first started playing that through till now, and I still play on those lobbies, and that's a 5-year-old game, who've played the Call of Duty World Championships and Esports World Championships. They've got it in their gamer tags. It's in their bio descriptions. Esports is potentially a big thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets mainstream media attention. More than just the gaming websites and on YouTube. I would not be surprised if it hits mainstream and gets some big sponsorship deals. I mean, it keeps regularly coming up in my news feeds on Facebook and Twitter. I think it's about to really break the mainstream media. I think the mainstream media would be stupid not to pick it up and give it a good run on a mainstream channel. Really stupid. I think that could really help TV with its viewership figures, getting young people back looking at that form of media, because they have been switching off for 2-3 decades now. Slowly, it's sped up, but the last 2 decades in particular, younger people are not accessing the media in the same way that their parents and grandparents do. I'm probably an exception to the rule. Although I don't have my TV set up at the moment for my FreeSat, which is going to get sorted out at some point in the new year. We have to sort out the satellite dish aerial. I will say this: I am one of those. I am just a millennial, even though I'm 30. The way sport is being accessed and the way media is being accessed, and we're seeing this with Major League Baseball now have a YouTube channel where they stream games live. Major League Rugby post all their matches, full replays on their channel. So sports leagues are now going, we're going to put our product on a free streaming platform. We're seeing it with the Australian Ice Hockey League. They stream all their games live. Australian Baseball League. Major League Baseball do stream games live. NASCAR put all their race replays, full races, on YouTube. So I've been able to watch sport that I wouldn't be able to access without paying through the nose through a subscription on the internet for free, legally, within rights. And I can get the NRL on the internet for a lot less for a whole season, for like £100 for the whole NRL season, uninterrupted. Whereas it will cost me nearly £2,000 to get the subscription on Sky Sports to watch the same product and actually watch less games. So yes, there are ways to access things on the internet. So the esports thing and sport in general is a good one. Brendan Gallagher, it all depends on, again, if Montreal can make the playoffs and make a playoff run, he might stay. Also, trade deadline. If Montreal look like they're going to miss the playoffs by the end of January, beginning of February, when the trade deadline comes up, he may leave. I don't know enough about the Montreal system. I know you're a Montreal fan. I'm because my team play in the Central Division. I'm just gonna have to double check the weather because it actually on my because I work on the roads. I'm a refuse collector, bin man in English speak. In North America, I do the bulk bins and the public waste disposal. It has tried to snow the last 2 days. It's been cold enough. It's been cold enough. Let's have a look at the weather because it heavily rained yesterday. It heavily rained the day before. Um, and where I live in the south of England, I'm to the west of London, and I'm just going to check the weather. I'm going to get my weather app up now. Let's have a look at the locations. We're going to go from technically I live in Maidenhead. Okay, well, okay. So, what time is it now? It's 9:10 UK time. So the chance of rain is going to be around 45%. It's going to be 6 degrees. It's going to get colder. At about 7 p.m., it's going to drop, and then it's going to warm up a little bit. It's not going to be as cold as it has been, but it's going to rain a lot today in the south of England. I don't know about the north of Scotland, for example, or anything like that. But from what I'm looking at, go away, bloody ad. From what I'm looking at on the next 24 to 48 hour forecast, it's going to rain a lot. Oh, it's just going to rain. It's going to stay pretty stable, 5-6 degrees Celsius here where I am. That doesn't mean further north in, let's say, Wales, Northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, there is snow coming. But it's going to be interesting to see how all this weather, all this damp weather we've had, all these strong winds we've had, how that affects sport, rugby union, football especially, how it affects sports that are played outside. Really interesting. I'm surprised that at this time of year in Canada, it's more rain than snow. I am surprised, especially on the Atlantic side of Canada, that's the case. Let's have a look. McKinnon's honesty about his contract. He could have got paid more elsewhere. He could have. This is why Crosby stayed in Pittsburgh with Malkin. That's why they stayed in Pittsburgh. They've taken a discount. They could have got paid an extra $3 million per year elsewhere. Crosby and Malkin also take discounts. They're less public about their discounts, but they also take discounts to stay where they are. I wish more players would do this, be willing to go below market rate and actually deflate wages. Because I even the NHL, which when we compare to the English Premier League in football or soccer, not enough players play for the love of the game or the love of the club they play for. They play for the money. And I think this has damaged the quality level of some sports. The fact that Nathan McKinnon has been so open saying he'll take a further cut to stay with the team, to help the team win, says when he was drafted, the team weren't very good. He went through that losing spell with Colorado. They're now a playoff team and considered one of the better teams in the league and one of the favourites to go at least to the conference finals, to the last four. The fact that a player is so open and honest about saying, yeah, I could have got 2, 3, 4, 5 million a year elsewhere. I'm willing to take a lower salary. Tells you a lot. It does tell you a lot. And the fact that he's even willing to take a further cut in his next contract tells you a lot about the character of the man. He plays for the love of the sport. I think Toronto, especially, they have a problem. They really do. Now, Tavares could have stayed with the Islanders for slightly less money and given them a hometown discount because he had been drafted by them, but he wanted to go to Toronto. He wanted to go for Toronto. He's grown up a Maple Leafs fan. He's from Toronto. Okay, fine on that one. The Nylander situation, Marner, Matthews, all overpaid. All of them overpaid. There are some, I think teams like the Jets, for example, I think players take less money there than they could earn elsewhere. Because Mark Scheifele could earn an extra $2 million if he was playing in, let's say, New York or Chicago. Absolutely. Um, I think it shows that there are still those players who play more for the love of the game than the love of money, and that's in all sports. And I wish more players uh, were like McKinnon and open and honest about why they're paid what they are and why they're actually saying, oh, actually, I've taken less money than I should have got, even though he's still massively overpaid for what he does. But that's my personal opinion on sports pay. I think in as a whole, I think sports stars are paid too much. There were snow updates on both channels. So 2 years ago on this channel, did some snow videos, and last year or last winter I did snow videos on the History Boffin channel, and it just shows how much fell in such a short space of time. Over the last 2 winters, we had some heavy. It fell quickly, and the temperatures went from what is it now? 6 degrees Celsius now. I don't know what that's in Fahrenheit. That's about sod it. That's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and it fell to -7. It had a 14-degree swing in about 4 hours. And I'm not joking. It really swung one winter. Patrick Lyon, do I think he'll be out of Winnipeg before the end of his contract? No, I think he's going to stay. He's playing a lot better now. He's proving himself. I think he's going to get a contract extension when he comes up to that period of talks. He's going to stay. I do think last season was a wake-up call for him. I think some tough conversations have been had between him and Paul Maurice and Cheryl Dayoff, and I think the tough love has worked because look how he's playing this season. He may be scoring less goals, but he's more of a all-rounded player this season. He's showing more. He's getting a lot more assists. He's better in open play. He's better defensively. I think he had a real bad season last season, and there were some tough conversations had over the off season. I think he did get less than what he was expecting, and then he was willing to take less and stay with the team. He's definitely playing better now than before. I wanted to vote Liberal. I want to keep politics off this channel if I can, but my local constituency, there wasn't a Lib Dem candidate, and I wanted to vote Lib Dem, and I had to vote for an independent who ended up losing his seat anyway because he was an ex-Conservative member of Parliament who was anti-Brexit, Dominic Grieve, for Beaconsfield. Because even though Maidenhead is literally, I could hit a cricket ball into the river and I'm in Maidenhead. I'm actually in Beaconsfield, so I'm in South Buckinghamshire. So yeah, I was annoyed that the constituency I voted, I'm under, didn't have a Lib Dem candidate, and that's probably why they got hammered. Well, they didn't get hammered. They actually had a voter increase. This is what's funny, and I will discuss this on the other channel. The Lib Dems had an increase of 4.6% of their share of the vote. They picked up all the Labour voters in every constituency that they stood in, who wanted Remain. 4.6%. They lost a seat. Jo Swinson, their leader, lost her seat. That was the only seat they lost. That tells you something about the party's direction. I can't stand the SNP because Scotland would. While I have issues with some of the things Scotland gets benefit-wise, like free prescriptions, free university, which is paid for by my taxes, I'm going to say this: Scotland would be decimated independence. The oil and gas industry is not what it was, and less people are drinking whiskey, less people are drinking alcohol. So the two big industries they have, distilling of alcohol and oil and gas, are not as viable financially as what they were 20 years ago. And the last referendum, it was stated, you've had your once in your lifetime opportunity, suck it up, buttercup. They accepted that, and now they can't accept losing that. It's weird. It's their only real policy is independence. They haven't really done very well when it comes to educational policing budgets. They've really fouled that up. But I want to keep that off the channel if I can. But I'm glad it's over. My now ex-girlfriend really did my nut with all the political BS. I just couldn't stand it. Yeah, they did. They had that once. It was called Tony Blair. Then the Iraq War happened. But no, I want to keep politics off the channel. But the way politics can help is with sports funding, grassroots facilities, and this is something that I've noticed more and more is playing fields and local council recreational facilities are being run down, have been long before 2008, long before the regional and central government and local government need to invest in sporting facilities, not just for kids, like playing fields, but for everyone. So communal sports centres, you know, parks that do actually have football pitches on. And I have not seen. I've not seen that video from AFTV. To be honest, I'm sort of trying to spend less time on social media since I've moved. I'm trying to be a bit more balanced in things because I live further away from work than I did before. I have to get up at 4 a.m. every morning, so I'm trying to be a bit more balanced in my downtime, and I'm having to readjust my routine. Is the best way to. So I will have to check it out when I can. I'm not a fan of Talksport. If I'm going to be honest, I'm really not a fan of Talksport. Partly because it's owned by Murdoch, and really not a big fan of Talksport per se. I have issues with how certain things are done on Talksport and bits and pieces. On saying that, I'll give it a viewing. I will have a look at it when I can. But it's going to be interesting. I think my favourite sports radio show, Radio 5 Live, drive time, wins every time. Every time, Radio 5 Live, drive time, brilliant. Because that's just fun listening to some of the on that because it's ad free. You see, it's because there's no adverts, and you get the regular news as well. If you're on the old stuck in the old traffic, Radio 5 Live drive time. That is, I think, for me in the UK, the best sports radio. Although I do pick up some of the podcasts from TSN on YouTube. Watch some of them, like Overdrive is a. No, I like Tim and Sid when it's not Tim and Sid. When it's Sid with the guest presenters, the rotating presenter. When Tim McAuliffe's off, he's less ranty. He's actually a proper journalist. When it's Tim and Sid, he just shouts and screams, and it's all an act. When it's Sid Sixero and one of the others, I like it more on Tim and Sid. I prefer Overdrive on TSN. With Noodles and all that lot, I prefer Overdrive. They seem to be a far more balanced podcast, far more balanced, less shouty, less doing it for attention. Jay and Dan as well is quite good, but I only watched that for the NHL discussion points, and I'm subscribed to both TSN and Sportsnet on YouTube. So oh god, this headset's digging into my head. But don't get me wrong, I do like watching Tim and Sid, but I prefer Overdrive with the J Dog and Noodles. Not gonna lie, and they just seem to be a bit more balanced and a bit more calm about what they're discussing and how they're going about discussing things. I think the Sportsnet radio podcast, when they're posting things, I think they're a little bit more. I don't know. Oh yeah, the hockey guy. I'm a big hockey guy fan. I've sent him some jerseys because he's not mainstream media. I think you get a more fans perspective and a more outside the box perspective, which you don't get with the mainstream media because the mainstream media has to sell you their product. If you were to compare Steve Dangle to the hockey guy, I can't stand Steve Dangle. I've had to unsubscribe for him because he's now got a gig with Sportsnet. And it's all too much. It's all too in your face. The hockey guy is more calm. I mean, when he first started, I was one of his first subscribers back in 2016. And yeah, he swore a lot more. There were a lot more cuss words. He was more of the passionate fan of the Boston Bruins, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Dallas Stars. Really passionate. he still is passionate about those teams. But because there's 31 teams in the league, and he realised, oh, it's all Toronto, 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 with the Canadian media, or Montreal, and the US media, it's certain teams in the US seem to get more coverage than the others. Mr. Hanson, the Barnett formula, seriously check it out. There is devolution of government. The central pot does give money to Scotland. That's something you need to really research, is the Barnett formula. The Barnett formula, I think it works out Scotland gets an extra 3 billion or something. It's a very small amount, but the Barnett formula does prop up the Scottish economy. It does mean that when the Scottish government in Holyrood gets control over certain budgets, which they have fought for with devolution, there is a top-up fee from the Barnett formula that also tops up Wales and Northern Ireland. So, yes, your taxes do pay for people on the national insurance, but that gets topped up with a central pot from central government in Westminster that the majority of taxpayers who are in England, of course, and Wales pay into, because of how it all works out. If Scotland leaves the Union, it will bankrupt itself very, very quickly, because they haven't been very, very clear on a lot of things. But again, that's a discussion for the other channel, and I'm not discussing it here. But when it comes to sport and politics, we need to have more investment in grassroots infrastructure. And certain governing bodies of sports have had to go in front of parliamentary inquiries, and they're not fit for purpose, such as the FA. I don't know what the link between sports and politics is in Canada, with the Canadian government, because you've got the provincial governments as well, and you've got the federal government. But again, there's some kind of formula in place, because in the Western world, sport and politics is tried to be as separate as possible. Whereas in places like Russia, which have got this 4-year WADA ban, there was definite government involvement, pumping government funds into a government-funded cheating program where they were drugging their athletes. That's where sport and government and politics needs to work. Really? Corbyn pumping millions to grassroots football? How? Where? The guy's a Marxist. This is where sport and politics needs to be separate. No, I don't believe anything. Where's the money coming from? Who's he going to tax? Because you start going after the wealthy, they're going to take the wealth out of the country. The French proved that. Francois Hollande decided to put a 75% tax rate in. All the wealth left the country. All of it. This is why so many football players in Europe hide their wealth. They don't want to pay the tax. Kotkaniemi, yes, that injury. A lot of people saying that the hit was clean. Nah, he slew-footed him. His landing on his neck could have broken his neck. Watching the hit and looking at the hit on Kotkaniemi by Zadorov, he takes his leg out. You can see him raise his leg and slew-foot him as he's going in for the check along the boards. For me, that's a dirty hit. And for all those fans saying, it's Zadorov, he's a big bloke. Yeah. Kotkaniemi is facing away. It's in the numbers. And watch his leg be swept from under him by the defenseman. Dirty hit. And the way he lands as well on his neck, that's shocking landing. I mean, lucky that it wasn't more serious, just a concussion. And he did skate off under his own steam, in a sense that he was sort of helped off the ice, but he was on his feet coming off the ice. But no, he landed awkwardly bad. It was like Pettersson last season with who took Pettersson out last year and did a similar thing. There was a similar incident with Pettersson playing for Vancouver against Florida Panthers, where he was taken out in a similar way behind the net and was hurt in a similar way. This is where Don Cherry would have got on Coach's Corner and go, these European players are soft. They're soft. Okay, you try landing on your neck like that when you've been, poleaxed from behind and slew-footed. You're going to be concussed, and you're lucky you haven't broken your neck. This is why I can't stand certain commentators and certain people online going, oh, yeah, Matheson. go, oh, these European players are soft. Have some of these Canadians and Americans seen British ice hockey? It's far from soft. It's brutal, absolutely brutal. More fights. Oh yeah, dirty hits. Have they seen some of the European ice hockey? It's not a. There may be a more emphasis on guile and skill, and some smaller players able to play at the top level in the European leagues. It's just as brutal. There are some horrific injuries, some horrific hits. I don't. I can't stand people who say European NHL players are soft or the Europeans are soft. I don't get that. I don't. The European game is just as brutal as the NHL. And if you look at the British League, especially, or the British leagues, absolutely still goon central. You've still got enforcers playing in the British leagues. They will take lumps out of each other. The fact that Liam Kirk got drafted is a testament to his character, and he went later in the draft than people expected. He's played some brutal hockey. He's been lucky. He's gone through playing that without getting injured a lot. British players aren't, European players aren't soft. I don't think enough North Americans have actually paid attention to the European leagues and how brutal they also can be. There are some massive hits going in, massive, and fighting is there. They're still fighting in the European league. Still fight. They fight less, but they go. There are some big units playing in the European leagues who will just drop the gloves, and a lot of North Americans, Canadians, and US born players are playing over here in Europe who like a scrap. I think Tyson Barrie's playing better under Sheldon Keefe, but I think Tyson Barrie wasn't happy at Colorado towards the end. He wanted a fresh start. He is an Ontario native, so hometown discount. Zadorov, I don't know. The way that Kyle Dubas is setting up that Toronto Maple Leafs team, they are lacking that physicality and, for a better word, that dirty player who will spark something. They've got rid of Kadri, they've got rid of Matt Martin, they've got rid of Komarov. They've lost that grit and a bit of nastiness. They are what I would call a soft team. They can't physically out on the physical side bully a team. They have to do it by skill alone, and you cannot do that. They're not a balanced team. They're top heavy. They're not balanced. They don't have the physical in front of the net presence. They don't have that big hulking defenseman who's going to do a Zadorov and just lay out players, center ice hits. They don't have that. They are a team that is purely based on skill. I think Kyle Dubas has completely mismanaged it, and he's overpaid his players. I think Tavares, look, he was out of contract and he wanted to go to Toronto. That's not his fault. He wanted to go where he was going to go. He knew he was going to go there. Even though the Sharks and the Islanders and a few other teams were willing to give him, the 7-year contract, or the 8-year contract, or whatever it was, however they work it out, he was willing. He only wanted to go one place, and Toronto matched the offers or bettered the offers that the other teams were putting forward. I don't know. I think the Islanders are a better team without him. San Jose, look at where San Jose are now. They're in a right mess. So I don't think necessarily it would have been the right place for him to go. So I don't know. I think Toronto, though, have shot themselves in the foot by getting rid of Kadri, Komarov, and Martin over the last 2 seasons. They've lost that spike. They've lost that agitator. They've lost that sandpaper and that grit and that third scoring line that also can shut down a team. They've lost that bottom six forward who can, throw some hits and shut down, be a shutdown line. I think Kyle Dubas has unbalanced the team. It's all too skill based. There's not enough pushback when they're behind and they need a bit of a physical a big hit, a shutdown play. They haven't got that. They've either got to outscore the opposition or they're done. Oh, these bloody headset digging into my head. I hate this headset. I think Carl Dubas has mismanaged it. I think there's your problem. We knew Mike Babcock didn't get on with Carl Dubas. They didn't see eye to eye in the way the team was constructed. We know that Mike Babcock, what's come out about Mike Babcock in recent weeks, he's not a particularly nice individual. But the coach wanted a vision of the team that was different to what the general manager wanted. And the general manager is the coach's boss. And you look at the teams that Mike Babcock coached at Anaheim and at Detroit, they had that pushback. They had that player, or those players who could be gnarly, who could be on the edge. Toronto don't have that. Even though the game has changed and has evolved, you still need that on the edge player who will put that hit in. You need those shutdown forwards and those shutdown defensemen who can be physical, but also press high. They haven't got that. They have skill, and that's it. Okay. New Jersey. Boucher would be a safe pair of hands as an interim. DeBoer has just been sacked, and he needs a break. Montgomery, we don't know what's going on with him, with what's happened at Dallas, with the unprofessional conduct and the allegations against him. We don't know what's going on with the Dallas Stars. I think Guy Boucher would possibly be the safe bet. Patrick Waugh would be the Hail Mary play. They're the only two out the four that you've listed that I think would be acceptable. The Montgomery situation was what happened at Dallas and how he lost his job. I don't think he may not coach in the NHL ever again. We know that there's an issue there that's quite serious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sacked so quickly. DeBoer, yeah, the way it went at San Jose with how inconsistently bad they've been this season. They've been good for a little period, but for the most part, they've been shocking. I think Boucher would probably be the top bet. Patrick Waugh would be the Hail Mary play, personally. There are one or two other coaches floating around. Nasruddin, you can't blame it on him. He's only been there a short period. There are other issues with the Devils. It's a much deeper problem with the New Jersey Devils than just who's behind the bench. I think there's a bigger issue with the dressing room, the organisation as a whole, and the direction the team is taking. Personally, I cannot see how they're going to improve without making some changes to the lineup and looking at what's gone on by looking at that dressing room, looking at the direction the direction the organisation is taking. There's a whole host of issues that is more than just performances. I think there's things not going right there behind the scenes that we are not aware of, personally. The Tavares situation at Toronto, that's on Carl Dubas. He was willing to pay the money. He wanted to put this skill team together with no sandpaper. He's been decent. He's had a few decent games, but again, it's a team with a losing record, so all players aren't playing well. It's very difficult to judge a player when a team is playing this badly. But it'll be interesting to see if they get a couple of wins together and get some confidence, how he plays. Because he's playing on a losing team right now and confidence is low for the whole group. It's not just him. I think he's decent, but I think confidence is low. They need to start getting a couple of wins together, or at least going to overtime, something to build the confidence, and then we can have a better picture of a player when playing with confidence. But a lot of players are confidence players. Confidence can take a team a long way, and we're not seeing that with a lot of teams right now. Confidence is lacking, and we'll have to see what happens. But anyway, I'm going to end that there. I've got to have to get me some breakfast because it's this been good. Oh, and you go on to the prospect. I'll end this one with Taylor Hall because I do want to get me some breakfast. It's 20 to 10 my time in the morning. I've been awake since 5 o'clock, so I do want to get something to eat. What would be a good thing for them to get in exchange for Taylor Hall? they're going to have to look at. They're going to have. It's going to be a player, a prospect, and some draft picks. I wouldn't say you would trade Taylor Hall for a goaltender. That's not how that works. I think for Taylor Hall, it's going to be a player or players. You might get two players back, a prospect and a draft pick. Something like that. I don't know what you get for him. He's not playing well. The team ain't playing well. It's a big risk with the contract he's going to expect when he's a free agent. He's going to be a rental. But what team wants to unbalance an already positive, you know, vibe if they're in the playoff hunt with a player who's low on form, low on confidence, not playing to his potential, is coming back from a serious injury. It's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. As far as we're aware, he hasn't requested a trade. Zach Bogosian is the only player that I'm aware of that has openly requested a trade in the last couple of days. So I don't see Taylor hasn't requested a trade. Yes, we know that the Jersey Devils GM is open to offers. Could Bogosian for Hull be an option? So could Taylor go to Buffalo? Zach Bogosian wants out of Buffalo, and Taylor Hall is on the trade block. So could he go to Buffalo? Perhaps we shall see what happens. I'm not gonna pass judgment until a trade is done, and then we'll see what happens, and we'll see who goes where and what pieces get moved. It could be a blockbuster trade where it's more than one team. We saw that with Kyle Turris and Matt Duchene, for example, a three-way trade. So we'll have to see what happens. There could be a lot more pieces in play, and this could actually cause a lot of movement in the trade market. But for now, I'm going to have to leave that there. More hockey than I was expecting, and some rugby league stuff as well, which was good to talk about. So I've got, have a look at a few bits and pieces, and I'll try and work out how the set's going to work and how we're going to set the set up and get the setup set up. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.